Hello and welcome to the Cultured Bumpkin. This is Chapter 8 of Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. And this is you know, excuse me, audio recording session. And we record it and then edit it into audiobooks. And we have a lot of fun doing it. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm drinking um, Diet Sam's Cola out of my little chili mug. So, anyway, let's get started. Chapter 8. In spite of Udolpho and the dressmaker, however, the party from Pulteney Street reached the upper rooms in very good time. The Thorpes and James Morland were there only 2 minutes before them, and Isabella, having gone through the usual ceremonial of meeting her friend with the most smiling and affectionate haste, of admiring the set of her gown and envying the curl of her hair, they followed their chaperones arm in arm into the ballroom, whispering to each other whenever a thought occurred, and supplying the place of many ideas by a squeeze of the hand or a smile of affection. The dancing began within a few minutes after they were seated, and James, who had been engaged quite as long as his sister, was very importunate with Isabella to stand up. But John was gone into the card room to speak to a friend, and nothing, she declared, should induce her to join the set before her dear Catherine could join it too. "I assure you," said she, "I would not stand up without your dear sister for all the world, for if I did we should certainly be separated the whole evening." Catherine accepted this kindness with gratitude, and they continued as they were for 3 minutes longer, when Isabella, who had been talking to James on the other side of her, turned again to his sister and whispered, "My dear creature, I'm afraid I must leave you. Your brother's so amazingly impatient to begin. I know you'll not mind my going away, and I dare say John'll be back in a moment, and then you may easily find me out." Catherine, though a little disappointed, had too much good nature to make any opposition, and the others rising up, Isabella had only time to press her friend's hand and say, "Goodbye, my dear love," before they hurried off. The younger Miss Thorpes, being also dancing, Catherine was left to the mercy of Mrs. Thorpe and Mrs. Allen, between whom she now remained. She could not help being vexed at the non-appearance of Mr. Thorpe, for she not only longed to be dancing, but was likewise aware that, as the real dignity of her situation could not be known, she was sharing with the scores of other young ladies still sitting down all the discredit of a wanting partner. To be disgraced in the eye of the world, to wear the appearance of infamy while her heart is all purity, her actions all innocence, and the misconduct of another the true source of her debasement, is one of those circumstances which peculiarly belong to the heroine's life, and her fortitude under it what particularly dignifies her character. Catherine had fortitude too. She suffered, but no murmur passed her lips. From this state of humiliation she was roused, at the end of 10 minutes, to a pleasanter feeling by seeing, not Mr. Thorpe, but Mr. Tilney within 3 yards of the place where they sat. He seemed to be moving that way, but but he did not see her, and therefore the smile and the blush which his sudden reappearance raised in Catherine passed away without sullying her heroic importance. He looked as handsome and as lively as ever, and was talking with interest to a fashionable and pleasing young woman who leant on his arm, and whom Catherine immediately guessed to be his sister, thus unthinkingly throwing away a fair opportunity of considering him lost to her forever by being married already. But guided only by what was simple and probable, it had never entered her head that Mr. Tilney could be married. He had not behaved, he had not talked like the married men to whom she had been used. He had never mentioned a wife, and he had acknowledged a sister. From these circumstances sprang the instant conclusion of his From these circumstances sprang the instant conclusion of his sister's now being by his side, and therefore, instead of turning a death-like paleness and falling in a fit on Mrs. Allen's bosom, Catherine sat erect, in the perfect use of her senses, and with cheeks only a little redder than usual. Mr. Tilney and his companion, who continued, though slowly, to approach, were immediately preceded by a lady, an acquaintance of Mrs. Thorpe, and this lady stopped to speak to her, as they belonging to her stopped likewise, and Catherine, catching catching Mr. Tilney's eye, instantly received from him the smiling tribute of recognition. She returned it with pleasure, and then, advancing still nearer, he spoke both to her he spoke both to her and Mrs. Allen. Excuse me. He spoke both to her and Mrs. Allen, by whom he was very civilly acknowledged. "I am very happy to see you again, sir. Indeed, I was afraid you'd left Bath." He thanked her for her fears, and said that he had quitted it for a week, on the very morning after his having had the pleasure of seeing her. "Well, sir, and I dare say you're not sorry to be back again, for this is just the place for young people, and indeed for everybody else too. I tell Mr. Allen when he talks of being sick of it that I'm sure he should not complain, for it's so very agreeable a place that it's so much better to be here than at home at this dull time of year. I tell him he's quite in luck to be sent here for his health. And I hope, madam, that Mr. Allen will be obliged to like the place from finding it of service to him." "Thank you, sir. I have no doubt that he will. A neighbor of ours, Dr. Skinner, was here for his health last winter and came away quite stout. That circumstance must give great encouragement." "Yes, sir, and Dr. Skinner and his family were here 3 months, so I tell Mr. Allen he must not be in a hurry to get away." Quick little water break. Hope you're having a good night. Here they were interrupted by a request from Mrs. Thorpe to Mrs. Allen that she would move a little to accommodate Mrs. Hughes and Miss Tilney with seats, as they had agreed to join their party. This was accordingly done, Mr. Tilney still continuing standing before them, and after a few minutes' consideration, he asked Catherine to dance with him. This compliment, delightful as it was, produced severe mortification to the lady, and in giving her denial, she expressed her sorrow on the occasion so very much as if she really felt that it had been so very much as if she really felt it that had Thorpe. oh, sorry. Every once in a while there'll be the wording is completely foreign to me, and I'll have to dissect it for a second and then try again. She expressed her sorrow on the occasion so very much as if she really felt it that had Thorpe, who joined her just afterwards, been half a minute earlier, he might have thought her sufferings rather too acute. This very easy manner in which he told her that he had kept her waiting did not by any means reconcile her more to her lot, nor did the particulars which he entered into while they were standing up, of the dogs and horses of the friend whom he had just left, and of a proposed exchange of terriers between them, interest her so much as to prevent her looking very often towards that last part of the room where she had left Mr. Tilney. Of her dear Isabella, to whom she particularly longed to point out that gentleman, she could see nothing. They were in different sets. She was separated from all her party and away from all her acquaintance. One mortification succeeded another, and from the whole she deduced this useful lesson, that to go previously engaged to a ball does not necessarily increase either the dignity or enjoyment of a young lady. From such a moralizing strain as this, she was suddenly roused by a touch on the shoulder, and turning round, perceived Mrs. Hughes directly behind her, attended by Miss Tilney and a gentleman. "I beg your pardon, Miss Moreland," said she, "for this liberty, but I cannot anyhow get to Miss Thorpe, and Mrs. Thorpe said that she was sure that you could not have the least objection to letting in this young lady by you." Mrs. Hughes could not have applied to any creature in the room more happy to oblige her than Catherine. The young ladies were introduced to each other, Miss Tilney expressing a proper sense of such goodness, Miss Moreland with the real delicacy of a generous mind making light of the obligation, and Mrs. Hughes, satisfied with having so respectfully satisfied with having so respectably settled her young charge, returned to her party. Miss Tilney had a good figure, a pretty face, and a very agreeable countenance, and her air, though it had not all the decided pretension, the resolute stylishness of Miss Thorpe's, had more real elegance. Her manners showed good sense and good breeding. They were neither shy nor affectedly open, and she seemed capable of being young, attractive, and at a ball without wanting to fix the attention of every man near her, and without exaggerated feelings of ecstatic delight or inconceivable vexation on every little trifling occurrence. Catherine, interested at once by her appearance and her relationship to Mr. Tilney, was desirous of being acquainted with her, and readily talked, therefore, whenever she could think of anything to say, and had courage and leisure for saying it. But the hindrance thrown in the way of a very speedy intimacy but the hindrance thrown in the way of a very speedy intimacy by the frequent want of one or more of these requisites prevented their doing more than going through the first rudiments of an acquaintance by informing themselves how well the other liked Bath, how much she admired its buildings and surrounding country, whether she drew or played or sang, and whether she was fond of riding on horseback. The two dances were scarcely concluded before Catherine found her arm gently seized by her faithful Isabella, who, in great spirits, exclaimed, "At last I've got you, my dearest creature. I've been looking for you this hour. What could induce you to come into this set when you knew I was in the other? I've been quite wretched without you." "My dear Isabella, how is it possible for me to get at you? I could not even see where you were." "So I told your brother all the time, and he would not believe me. 'Do go and see for her, Mr. Moreland,' said I, but all in vain. He would not stir an inch. Was it not so, Mr. Moreland? But you men are all so immoderately lazy. I've been scolding him to such a degree, my dear Catherine, you'd be quite amazed. You know I never stand upon ceremony with such people." "Look at that young lady with the white beads round her head," whispered Catherine, detaching her friend from James. "It's Mr. Tilney's sister." "Oh, heavens, you don't say so. Let me look at her this moment. What a delightful girl. I never saw anything half so beautiful. But where is her all-conquering brother? Is he in the room? Point him out to me this instant, if he is. I'd die to see him. Mr. Moreland, if you're not to listen—" "Mr. Moreland, you are not to listen. We're not talking about you." "But what's all the whispering about? What's going on?" "There now, I knew it would be. You men have such restless curiosity. Talk of the curiosity of women, indeed. 'Tis nothing, but be satisfied, for you're not to know anything at all of the matter." "And is it likely to satisfy me, do you think?" "Well, I declare I never knew anything like you. What can it signify to you what we're talking of? Perhaps we are talking about you, therefore I'd advise you not to listen, therefore I would advise you not to listen, or you may happen to hear something not very agreeable." In this commonplace chatter, which lasted some time, the original subject seemed entirely forgotten, and though Catherine was very well pleased to have it dropped for a while, she could not avoid a little suspicion at the total suspension of all Isabella's impatient desire to see Mr. Tilney. When the orchestra struck up a fresh dance, James would have led his fair partner away, but she resisted. "I tell you, Mr. Moreland," she cried. "I tell you, Mr. Moreland," she cried, "I would not do such a thing for all the world. How can you be so teasing? Only conceive, my dear Catherine, what your brother wants me to do. He wants me to dance with him again, though I tell him that it's a most improper thing and entirely against the rules. It'd make us the talk of the place if there were not to It would make us the talk of the place if we were not to change partners." "Upon my honor," said James, "in these public assemblies it's often done as not." "Nonsense! How can you say so? But when men have a point to carry, you never stick at anything. My sweet Catherine, do support me. Persuade your brother how impossible it is. Tell him that it would tell him that it would quite tell him that it would quite shock you to see me do such a thing. Now would it not? No, not at all. But if you think it's wrong, you'd better change. There, cried Isabella. You hear what your sister says, and yet you'll not mind her. Well, remember that it's not my fault if we set all the ladies in Bath in a bustle. Come along, my dearest Catherine, for heaven's sake, and stand by me. And off they went to regain their former place. John Thorpe, in the meanwhile, had walked away, and Catherine, ever willing to give Mr. Tilney an opportunity of repeating the agreeable request which had already flattered her once, made her way to Mrs. Allen and Mrs. Thorpe as fast as she could, in the hope of finding him still with them, a hope which, when it proved to be fruitless, she felt to have been highly unreasonable. Well, my dear, said Mrs. Thorpe, impatient for praise of her son, I hope you've had an agreeable partner. Very agreeable, madam. Well, I'm glad of it. John has charming spirits, has he not? Did you meet Mr. Tilney, my dear? Said Mrs. Allen. No, where is he? He was with us just now, and he was so tired of lounging about that he was resolved to go and dance. So I thought perhaps he would ask you if he'd met you. Oh, that was not the fellow. That was one of the girls. No, where is he? He was with us just now, and said he was so tired of lounging about that he was resolved to go and dance. So I thought perhaps he would ask you if he met you. Where can he where can he be? Asked Catherine, looking around. For she had not looked but she had not looked around long before she saw him leading a young lady to the dance. Ah, he's got a partner. I wish he had asked you, said Mrs. Allen, and after a short silence she added, he is a very agreeable young man. Indeed he is, Mrs. Allen, said Mrs. Thorpe, smiling complacently. I must say, though I am his mother, that there is not a more though I'm his mother, that there's not a more agreeable young man in the world. This inapplicable answer might have been too much for the comprehension of many, but it did not puzzle Mrs. Allen, for after only a moment's consideration, she said in a whisper to Catherine, I dare say she thought I was speaking of her son. Catherine was disappointed and vexed. She seemed to have missed by so many the very object she had in view. She seemed to have missed by so little the very object she had in view, and this persuasion did not incline her to a very gracious reply when John Thorpe came up to her soon afterwards and said, Well, Miss Moreland, I suppose you and I are to stand up and jig it together again. Oh, no, I'm much obliged to you. Our 2 dances are over, and besides, I'm tired and do not mean to dance any more. Do not you? Well, then let us walk out and quiz people. Come along with me, and I'll show you the 4 greatest quizzes, and I'll show you the 4 greatest quizzers in the room, my 2 younger sisters and their partners. I've been laughing at 'em this half hour. Again Catherine excused herself, and at last he walked off to quiz his sisters by himself. The rest of the evening she found very dull. Mr. Tilney was drawn away from their party at tea to attend that of his partner. Miss Tilney, though belonging to it, did not sit near her, and James and Isabella were so much engaged in conversing together that the latter had no leisure to bestow more on her friend than one smile, one squeeze, and one dearest Catherine. That's the end of chapter 8. End of chapter 8. All right. Well, thank you very much for watching. Hope you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not. And I'll talk to you tomorrow night. Chapter 9. The progress of Catherine's unhappiness from the events of the evening was as follows. It appeared first in a general dissatisfaction with everybody about her, while she remained in the rooms, which speedily brought on considerable weariness and a violent desire to go home. This, on arriving in Pulteney Street, took the direction of extraordinary hunger, and when that was appeased, changed into an earnest longing to be in bed. Such was the extreme point of her distress, for when there she immediately fell into a sound sleep which lasted 9 hours, and from which she awoke perfectly revived, in excellent spirits, with fresh hopes and fresh schemes. The first wish of her heart was to improve her acquaintance with Miss Tilney, and almost her first resolution to seek her for that purpose in the pump room at noon. In the pump room, one so newly arrived in Bath must be met with. In that building she had already found so favorable for the discovery of female excellence and the completion of female intimacy, so admirably adapted for secret discourses and unlimited confidence, that she was most reasonably encouraged to expect another friend from within its walls. Her plan for the morning thus settled, she sat quietly down to her book after breakfast, resolving to remain in the same place and the same employment till the clock struck 1, and from habitude very little incommoded by the remarks and ejaculations of Mrs. Allen, whose vacancy of mind and incapacity for thinking were such that she never talked a great deal, so that she could never be entirely silent. That as she never talked a great deal, so she could never be entirely silent, and therefore, while she sat at her work, if she lost her needle or broke her thread, if she heard a carriage in the street or saw a speck upon her gown, she must observe it aloud, whether there were any one at leisure to answer her or not. At about 12:30, a remarkably loud rap drew her in haste to the window, and scarcely had she time to inform Catherine of there being 2 open carriages at the door, in the first only a servant, her brother driving Miss Thorpe in the second, before John Thorpe came running upstairs, calling out, "Well, Miss Moreland, here I am. Have you been waiting long? We could not come before. The old devil of a coachmaker was such an eternity finding out a thing fit to be got into, and now it's 10,000 to 1, but they break down before we're out the street. How do you do, Miss Allen? A famous bag last night, was it not? Come, Miss Moreland, be quick, for the others are in a confounded hurry to be off. They want to get their tumble over." "What do you mean?" said Catherine. "Where are you all going to?" "Going to? Why, have you not forgot our engagement? Did we not agree together to take a drive this morning? What a head you have! We're going up to Cleverton Down." "Something was said about it, I remember," said Catherine, looking at Mrs. Allen for her opinion. "But really I did not expect you." "Not expect me? That's a good one. And what dust would you have made if I'd not come?" Catherine's silent appeal to her friend, meanwhile, was entirely thrown away, for Mrs. Allen, not being at all in the habit of conveying any expression herself by a look, was not aware of its being ever intended by anybody else, and Catherine, whose desire of seeing Miss Tilney again could at that moment bear a short delay in favor of a drive, and who thought there could be no impropriety in her going with Mr. Thorpe, as Isabella was going at the same time with James, was therefore obliged to speak plainer. "Well, ma'am, what do you say to it? Can you spare me for an hour or two? Shall I go?" "Do just as you please, my dear," replied Mrs. Allen, with the most placid indifference. Catherine took the advice and ran off to get ready. In a very few minutes she reappeared, having scarcely allowed the 2 others time enough to get a few short sentences in her praise after Thorpe had procured Mrs. Allen's admiration of his gig, and then receiving her friend's parting good wishes, they both hurried downstairs. "My dearest creature," cried Isabella, to whom the duty of friendship immediately called her before she could get into the carriage, "you've been at least 3 hours getting ready. I was afraid you were ill. What a delightful ball we had last night! I had 1,000 things to say to you, but make haste and get in, for I long to be off." Catherine followed her orders and turned away, but not too soon to hear her friend exclaim aloud to James, "What a sweet girl she is! I quite dote on her." "You'll not be frightened, Miss Moreland," said Thorpe, as he handed her in. "If my horse should dance about a little at first setting off, he will most likely give a plunge or two, and perhaps take the rest for a minute. But he'll soon know his master. He's full of spirits, playful as can be, but there's no vice in him." Catherine did not think the portrait a very inviting one, but it was too late to retreat, and she was too young to own herself frightened. So, resigning herself to her fate and trusting to the animal's boasted knowledge of its owner, she sat peaceably down and saw Thorpe sit down by her. Everything being then arranged, the servant who stood at the horse's head was bid in an important voice to "let 'em go," and off they went in the quietest manner imaginable, without a plunge or a caper or anything like one. Catherine, delighted at so happy an escape, spoke her pleasure aloud with grateful surprise, and her companion immediately made the matter perfectly simple by assuring her that it was entirely owing to the peculiarly judicious manner in which he had then held the reins, and the singular discernment and dexterity with which he had directed his whip. Catherine, though she could not help wondering that with such perfect command of his horse he should think it necessary to alarm her with a relation of its tricks, congratulated herself sincerely on being under the care of so excellent a coachman, and perceiving that the animal continued to go on in the same quiet manner, without showing the smallest propensity towards any unpleasant vivacity, and considering its inevitable pace was 10 miles an hour, by no means alarmingly fast, gave herself up to all the enjoyment of air and exercise of the most invigorating kind in a fine mild day of February, with the consciousness of safety. A silence of several minutes succeeded their first short dialogue. It was broken by Thorpe's saying very abruptly, "Old Allen is as rich as a Jew, is not he?" Catherine did not understand him, and he repeated his question, adding in explanation, "Old Allen, the man you are with." "Oh, Mr. Allen, you mean? Yes, I believe he is very rich." "And no children at all?" "No, not any." "A famous thing for his neck stairs. He's your godfather, is not he?" "My godfather? No." "But you're always very much with him?" "Yes, very much." That's what I meant. He seems a kind of good old fellow enough, and he's lived very well in his time, I dare say. He's not gouty for nothing. Does he drink his bottle a day now?" "His bottle a day? No. Why would you think such a thing? He's a very temperate man, and you could not fancy him—" "Lord help you! You women are always thinking of men's being in liquor. Why do you not suppose a man is overset by a bottle? I'm sure of this, that if everybody was to drink their bottle a day, there would be not half the disorders in the world there are now. It'd be a famous good thing for us all." "I cannot believe it." "Oh, Lord, it'd be the saving of thousands. There's not the 100th part of the wine consumed in this kingdom that there ought to be. Our foggy climate wants help." "And yet I've heard there's a greater deal of wine drunk in Oxford." "Oxford? There's no drinking at Oxford now, I assure you. Nobody drinks there. You could hardly meet with a man who goes beyond his 4 pints at the utmost. Now, for instance, it was reckoned a remarkable thing at the last party in my rooms that, upon an average, we cleared about 5 pints a head. It was looked upon as something out of the common way. Mine's famous good stuff, to be sure. You would not often meet with anything like it in Oxford, and that may account for it. But this will just give you a notion of the general rate of drinking there." "Yes, it does give a notion," said Catherine warmly, "and that is, that you all drink a great deal more wine than I thought you did. However, I'm sure James does not drink so much." This declaration brought on a loud and overpowering reply, of which no part was very distinct, except the frequent exclamations, amounting almost to oaths, which adored it, and Catherine was left, when it ended, with a rather strengthened belief of there being a great deal of wine drunk in Oxford, and the same happy conviction of her brother's comparative sobriety. Thorpe's ideas then all reverted to the merits of his own equipage, and she was called on to admire the spirit and freedom with which his horse moved along, and the ease which his paces, as well as the excellence of the springs, gave the motion of the carriage. She followed him in all his admiration as well as she could. To go before or beyond him was impossible. His knowledge and her ignorance of the subject, his rapidity of expression, and her diffidence of herself, put that out of her power. She could strike out nothing new in commendation, but she readily echoed whatever he chose to assert, and it was finally settled between them without any difficulty that his equipage was altogether the most complete of its kind in England, his carriage the neatest, his horse the best goer, and himself the best coachman. "You really do not think, Mr. Thorpe," said Catherine, venturing after some time to consider the matter as entirely decided, and to offer some little variation on the subject, "that James's gig will break down?" "Break down? Oh, Lord! Did you ever see such a little tituppy thing in your life? There's not a sound piece of iron about it. The wheels have been fairly worn out these 10 years at least, and as for the body, upon my soul, you might shake it to pieces with a touch. It's the most devilish little rickety business I ever beheld. Thank God we've got better. I would not be bound to go 2 miles in it for 50,000 pounds. "Good heavens!" cried Catherine, quite frightened. "Then pray let us turn back. They will certainly meet with an accident if we go on. Do let us turn back, Mr. Thorpe. Stop and speak to my brother, and tell him how very unsafe it is." Unsafe? Oh, Lord, what is there in that? They'll only get a little roll if it does break down, and there's plenty of dirt. It'll be excellent falling. Oh, curse it. The carriage is safe enough if a man knows how to drive it. A thing of that sort in good hands will last above 20 years after it's fairly worn out. Lord bless you, I'd undertake for £5 to drive it to York and back without losing a nail. Catherine listened with astonishment. She knew not how to reconcile two such very different accounts of the same thing, for she had not been brought up to understand the propensities of a rattle, nor to know how many idle assertions and impudent falsehoods the excess of vanity will lead. Her own family were plain, matter of fact people who seldom aimed at wit of any kind, her father, at the utmost, being contented with a pun, and her mother with a proverb. They were not in the habit, therefore, of telling lies to increase their importance, or of asserting at one moment that they would contradict the next. She reflected on the affair for some time in much perplexity, and was more than once on the point of requesting Mr. Thorpe a clearer insight into his real opinion on the subject, but she checked herself, because it appeared to her that he did not excel in giving those clearer insights, in making those things plain which he had before made ambiguous. And join into this the consideration that he would not really suffer his sister and his friend to be exposed to a danger from which he might easily preserve them, she concluded at last that he must know the carriage to be, in fact, perfectly safe, and therefore would alarm herself no longer. By him the whole matter seemed entirely forgotten, and all the rest of his conversation, or rather talk, began and ended with himself and his own concerns. He told her of horses which he had bought for a trifle and sold for incredible sums, of racing matches in which his judgment had infallibly foretold the winner, of shooting parties in which he had killed more birds, though without having one good shot, than all his companions together, and described to her some famous day's sports, with the foxhounds in which his foresight and skill in directing the dogs had repaired the mistakes of the most experienced huntsman, and in which the boldness of his riding, though it had never endangered his own life for a moment, had been constantly leading others into difficulties, which he calmly concluded had broken the necks of many. Little as Catherine was in the habit of judging for herself, and unfixed as were her general notions of what men ought to be, she could not entirely repress a doubt, while she bore with the effusions of his endless conceit of his being altogether completely agreeable. It was a bold surmise, for she was for he was Ill, for he was Isabella's brother, and she had been assured by James that his manners would recommend him to all her sex. But in spite of this, the extreme weariness of his company, which crept over her before they had been out an hour, and which continued unceasingly to increase till they stopped in Pulteney Street again, induced her in some small degree to resist such high authority and to distrust his powers of giving universal pleasure. When they arrived at Mrs. Allen's door, the astonishment of Isabella was hardly to be expressed, or on finding it was too late in the day for them to attend her friend into the house past 3 o'clock. It was inconceivable, incredible, impossible, and she would neither believe her own watch, nor her brother's, nor the servants'. She would believe no assurance of it founded on reasons or reality, till Morland produced his watch and ascertained the fact. To have doubted a moment longer then would have been equally inconceivable, incredible, and impossible, and she could only protest over and over again that no 2 hours and a half had ever gone off so swiftly before, as Catherine was called on to confirm. Catherine could not tell a falsehood, even to please Isabella, but the latter was spared the misery of her friend's dissent in voice by not wanting for her answer. Her own feelings entirely engrossed her. Her wretchedness was most acute on finding herself obliged to go directly home. It was ages since she had a moment's conversation with her dearest Catherine. It appeared as if they were never to be together again. So with sniffles of most exquisite misery and the laugh and eye of utter despondency, she bade her friend adieu and went on. Catherine found Mrs. Allen just returned from all the busy idleness of the morning, and was immediately greeted with, "And I hope you've had a pleasant errand?" "Yes, ma'am, thank you. We could not have had a nicer day." "So Miss Thorpe said she was vastly pleased at your going." "You've seen Mrs. Thorpe, then?" "Yes, I went to the pump room as soon as you were gone, and there I met her, and we had a great deal of talk together. She says there was hardly any veal to be got at market this morning. It's so uncommonly scarce." Did you see anybody else of our acquaintance? Yes, we agreed to take a turn into the Crescent, and there we met Mrs. Hughes and Mr. and Miss Tilney walking with her. Did you indeed? And did they speak to you? Yes, we walked along the Crescent together for half an hour. They seemed very agreeable people. Miss Tilney was in a very pretty spotted muslin, and I fancy by what I can learn that she always dresses very handsomely. Mrs. Hughes talked to me a great deal about the family. And what did she tell you of them? Oh, a vast deal indeed. She hardly talked of anyone else. Did she tell you what part of Gloucestershire they come from? Yes, she did, but I can't recollect now. But they're a very good kind of people, and very rich. Mrs. Tilney was a Miss Drummond, and she and Mrs. Hughes were schoolfellows. And Miss Drummond had a very large fortune, and when she married, her father gave her £20,000 and 500 to buy wedding clothes. Mrs. Hughes saw all the clothes after they came from the warehouse. And are Mr. and Mrs. Tilney in Bath? Yes, I fancy they are, but I'm not quite certain. Upon recollection, however, I have a notion they're both dead. At least the mother is. Yes, I'm sure Miss Tilney's dead, because Mrs. Hughes told me that there was a beautiful set of pearls that Mr. Drummond gave his daughter on their wedding day, and that Miss Tilney has got now, for they were put there by her father when her mother died. And is Mr. Tilney, my partner, the only son? I cannot be quite positive about that, my dear. I have some idea he is. But, however, he's a fine young man, Mrs. Hughes says, and likely to do very well. Catherine inquired no further. She had heard enough to feel that Mrs. Allen had no real intelligence to give, and that she was most particularly unfortunate herself in having missed such a meeting with both brother and sister. Could she have foreseen such a circumstance, nothing should have persuaded her to go out with the others, and as it was, she could only lament her ill luck and think over what she had lost, till it was clear to her that the drive had by no means been very pleasant, and that John Thorpe himself was quite disagreeable. Chapter 10. The Allens, Thorpes, and Morlands all met in the evening at the theatre, and as Catherine and Isabella sat together, there was then the opportunity for the latter to utter some few of the many thousand things which had been collecting within her for communication in the immeasurable length of time which had divided them. "Oh, heavens, my beloved Catherine, have I got you at last?" was her address on Catherine's entering the box and sitting by her. "Now, Mr. Morland," for he was close to her on the other side, "I shall not speak another word to you all the rest of the evening, so I charge you not to expect it. My sweetest Catherine, how have you been this long age? But I need not ask you, for you look delightfully. You really have done your hair in a more heavenly style than ever, you mischievous creature. Do you want to attract everybody? I assure you my brother is quite in love with you already. And as for Mr. Tilney, but that's a settled thing. Even your modesty can't doubt his attachment now. His coming back to Bath makes it too plain. Oh, what would I not give to see him? I'm really quite wild with impatience. My mother says he's the most delightful young man in the world. She saw him this morning, you know. You must introduce him to me. Is he at the house now? Look about, for heaven's sake. I assure you I can hardly exist till I see him. No, said Catherine. He's not here. I can't see him anywhere. Oh, horrid. Am I never to be acquainted with him? How do you like my gown? I think it does not look amiss. The sleeves were entirely my own thought. Do you know I get so immoderately sick of Bath? Your brother and I were agreeing this morning that, though it's vastly well to be here for a few weeks, we would not live here for millions. We soon found that our tastes were exactly alike in preferring the country to every other place. Really, our opinions are so exactly the same, it was quite ridiculous. There's not a single point in which we differed. I would not have had you by for the world. You're such a sly thing. I'm sure you would have made some droll remark or other about it. No, indeed, I should not. Oh, yes, you would indeed. I know you better than you know yourself. You would have told us that we seemed born for each other, or some nonsense like that, which would have distressed me beyond conception. My cheeks would have been as red as your roses. I would not have had you by for the world. Indeed, you do me injustice. I would not have made so improper a remark upon any account. And besides, I am sure it would have never entered my head. Isabella smiled incredulously and talked the rest of the evening to James. Catherine's resolution of endeavoring to meet Miss Tilney again continued in full force the next morning. Until the usual moment of going on to the pump room, she felt some alarm for the dread of a second prevention. But nothing of that kind occurred. No visitors appeared to delay them, and they all three set off in good time for the pump room, where the ordinary course of events in conversation took place. Mr. Allen, after drinking his glass of water, joined some gentlemen to talk over the politics of the day and compare the accounts of their newspapers. And the ladies walked about together, noticing every new face and almost every new bonnet in the room. The female part of the Thorpe family, attended by James Morland, appeared among the crowd in less than a quarter of an hour, and Catherine immediately took her usual place by the side of her friend. James, who was now in constant attendance, maintained a similar position, and separating themselves from the rest of their party, they walked in that manner for some time, till Catherine began to doubt the happiness of a situation which, confining her entirely to her friend and brother, gave her very little share in the notice of either. They were always engaged in some sentimental discussion or lively dispute, but their sentiment was conveyed in such whispering voices, and their vivacity attended with so much laughter, that though Catherine's supporting opinion was not unfrequently called for by one or the other, she was never able to give any, from not having heard a word of the subject. At length, however, she was empowered to disengage herself from her friend by the avowed necessity of speaking to Miss Tilney, whom she most joyfully saw just entering the room with Mrs. Hughes, and whom she instantly joined with a firmer determination to be acquainted than she might have had courage to command, had she not been urged by the disappointment of the day before. Miss Tilney met her with great civility, returned her advances with equal goodwill, and they continued talking together as long as both parties remained in the room. And though in all probability not an observation was made, nor an expression used by either which had not been made and used some thousands of times before under that roof in every Bath season, yet the merit of their being spoken with simplicity and truth, and without personal conceit, might be something uncommon. "How well your brother dances," was an artless exclamation of Catherine's towards the close of their conversation, which at once surprised and amused her companion. "Henry," she replied with a smile, "yes, he does dance very well. He must have thought it very odd to hear me say I was engaged the other evening when he saw me sitting down, but I really had been engaged the whole day to Mr. Thorpe." Miss Tilney could only bow. "You cannot think," added Catherine after a moment's silence, "how surprised I was to see him again. I felt so sure of his being quite gone away. When Henry had the pleasure of seeing you before, he was in Bath but for a couple of days. He only came to engage lodgings for us. That never occurred to me, and, of course, not seeing him anywhere, I thought he must be gone. Was not the young lady he danced with on Monday a Miss Smith?" "Yes, an acquaintance of Mrs. Hughes. I dare say she was very glad to dance. Do you think her pretty?" "Not very." "He comes into the pump room, I suppose?" "Yes, sometimes. But he is rid out this morning with my father." Mrs. Hughes now joined them and asked Miss Tilney if she was ready to go. "I hope I shall have the pleasure of seeing you again soon," said Catherine. "Shall you be at the cotillion ball tomorrow?" "Yes, I think we certainly shall." "Well, I'm glad for it, for we shall all be there." This civility was duly returned, and they parted, on Miss Tilney's side with some knowledge of her new acquaintance's feelings, and on Catherine's without the smallest consciousness of having explained them. She went home very happy. The morning had answered all her hopes, and the evening of the following day was now the object of expectation, the future good. What gown and what headdress she should wear on the occasion became her chief concern. She could not be justified in it. Dress is at all times a frivolous distinction, and excessive solicitude about it often destroys its own aim. Catherine knew all this very well. Her great aunt had read her a lecture on the subject only the Christmas before, and she lay awake 10 minutes on Wednesday night debating between her spotted and her tamboured muslin, and nothing but the shortness of time prevented her buying a new one for the evening. This would have been an error in judgment, great, though not uncommon, from which one of the other sex rather than her own, a brother rather than a great aunt, might have warned her, for man only can be aware of the insensibility of man towards a new gown. It would be mortifying to the feelings of many ladies Could they be made to understand how little the heart of man is affected by what is costly or new in their attire? How little it is biased by the texture of their muslin, and how unsusceptible of peculiar tenderness towards the spotted, the sprigged, the mole, or the jaconet. Woman is fine for her own satisfaction alone. No man will admire her the more, no woman will like her the better for it. Neatness and fashion are enough for the former, and a something of shabbiness or impropriety will be most endearing to the latter. But not one of these grave reflections troubled the tranquillity of Catherine. She entered the rooms on Thursday evening with feelings very different from what had attended her hither the Monday before. She had then been exulting in her engagement to Thorpe, and was now chiefly anxious to avoid his sight, lest he should engage her again. For though she could not, dared not, expect that Mr. Tilney should ask her a third time to dance, her wishes, hopes, and plans all centered in nothing less. Every young lady may feel for my heroine in this critical moment, for every young lady has at some time or other known the same agitation. All have been, or at least all have believed themselves to be, in danger from the pursuit of someone whom they wish to avoid, and all have been anxious for the attentions of someone whom they wish to please. As soon as they were joined by the Thorpes, Catherine's agony began. She fidgeted about if John Thorpe came towards her, hid herself as much as possible from his view, and when he spoke to her, pretended not to hear him. The cotillions were over, the country dancing beginning, and she saw nothing of the Tilneys. "Do not be frightened, my dear Catherine," whispered Isabella, "but I'm really going to dance with your brother again. I declare positively it's quite shocking. I tell him he ought to be ashamed of himself, but you and John must keep us in countenance. Make haste, my dear creature, come join us. John just walked off, but he'll be back in a moment." Catherine had neither time nor inclination to answer. The others walked away. John Thorpe was still in view, and she gave herself up for lost. That she might not appear, however, to observe or expect him, she kept her eyes intently fixed on her fan, and a self-condemnation for her folly in supposing that among such a crowd they should never even meet with the Tilneys in any reasonable time had just passed through her mind when she suddenly found herself addressed and again solicited to dance by Mr. Tilney himself. With what sparkling eyes and ready motion she granted his request, and with how pleasing a flutter of heart she went with him to the set, may be easily imagined. To escape, and, as she believed, so narrowly escape John Thorpe, and to be asked so immediately on his joining her, asked by Mr. Tilney, as though he had sought her on purpose, it did not appear to her that life could supply any greater felicity. Scarcely had they worked themselves into the quiet possession of a place, however, when her attention was claimed by John Thorpe, who stood behind her. "Hey day, Miss Moreland," said he. "What's the meaning of this? I thought you and I were going to dance together." "I wonder you should think so, for you never asked me." "That's a good one, by Jove. I asked you as soon as I came into the room, and I was just going to ask you again, but I turned round, you was gone. This is a cursed shabby trick. I only came for the sake of dancing with you, and I firmly believe you are engaged to me ever since Monday. Yes, I remember. I asked you while you were waiting in the lobby for your cloak, and here have I been telling all my acquaintance that I was going to dance with the prettiest girl in the room, and when they see you standing up with somebody else, they'll quiz me famously." "Oh, no, they'll never think of me after such a description as that. By heavens, if they do not, I'll kick 'em out of the room for blockheads. What chap have you there?" Catherine satisfied his curiosity. "Tilney," he repeated. I don't know him. A good figure of a man, well put together. Does he want a horse? Here's a friend of mine, Sam Fletcher, has got one to sell that'd suit anybody. A famous clever animal for the road. Only 40 guineas. I had 50 to buy it myself, but it's one of my maxims always to buy a good horse when I meet with one. But it would not answer my purpose. It would not do for the field. I'd give any money for a real good hunter. I have 3 now, the best that ever were backed. I'd not take 800 guineas for 'em. Fletcher and I mean to get a house in Leicestershire against the next season. It's so uncomfortable living at the inn." This was the last sentence by which he could weary Catherine's attention, for he was then borne off by the resistless pressure of a long string of passing ladies. Her partner now drew near and said, "That gentleman would have put me out of patience had he stayed with you half a minute longer. He has no business to withdraw the attention of my partner from me. We have entered into a contract of mutual agreeableness for the space of an evening, and all our agreeableness belongs solely to each other for that time. Nobody can fasten themselves on the notice of one without injuring the rights of the other. I consider a country dance as an emblem of marriage. Fidelity and complaisance are the principal duties of both, and those men who do not choose to dance or marry themselves have no business with the partners or wives of their neighbors. But they are such very different things that you think they cannot be compared together. To be sure not. People that marry can never part, but must go and keep house together. People that dance only stand opposite each other in a long room for half an hour. And such is your definition of matrimony and dancing. Taken in that light, certainly, their resemblance is not striking, but I think I could place them in such a view. You'll allow that in both, man has the advantage of choice, woman only the power of refusal. But in both, it's the engagement between man and woman formed for the advantage of each, and that when once entered into, they belong exclusively to each other till the moment of its dissolution. That is their duty, each to endeavor to give the other no cause for wishing that he or she had bestowed themselves elsewhere, and their best interest is to keep their own imaginations from wandering towards the perfections of their neighbors, or fancying that they should have been better off with anybody else. You'll allow all this? Well, yes, to be sure, as you state it, all this sounds very well, but still they are so very different. I cannot look upon them at all in the same light, nor think the same duties belong to them. In one respect, there certainly is a difference. In marriage, the man is supposed to provide for the support of the woman to make the home agreeable to the man. He is to purvey, and she is to smile. But in dancing, the duties are exactly changed. The agreeableness, the compliance are expected from him, while she furnishes the fan and the lavender water. That, I suppose, was the difference of duties which struck you as rendering the conditions incapable of comparison. No, indeed, I never thought of that. Then I'm quite at a loss. One thing, however, I must observe. This disposition on your side is rather alarming. You totally disallow any similarity in the obligations. And may I not thence infer that your notions of the duties of the dancing state are not so strict as your partner might wish? Have I not reason to fear that if the gentleman who spoke to you just now were to return, or if any other gentleman were to address you, there would be nothing to restrain you from conversing with him as long as you chose? Mr. Thorpe is such a very particular friend of my brother's that if he talks to me, I must talk to him again. But there are hardly 3 young men in this room besides him that I have any acquaintance with. And that is to be my only security? Alas, alas! I am sure you cannot have a better, for I do not know anybody. It's impossible for me to talk to him, and besides, I don't want to talk to anybody. Now you've given me a security worth having, and I shall proceed with courage. Do you find Bath as agreeable as when I had the honor of making the inquiry before? Yes, quite. More so, indeed. More so. Take care, or you'll forget to be tired of it at the proper time. You ought to be tired of it at the end of 6 weeks. I don't think I should be tired if I were to stay here 6 months. Bath, compared with London, has little variety, and so everybody finds out every year. For 6 weeks, I allow Bath is pleasant enough, but beyond that, it's the most tiresome place in the world. You'd be told so by people of all descriptions who come regularly every winter, lengthen their 6 weeks into 10 or 12, and go away at last because they can afford to stay no longer. Well, other people must judge for themselves, and those who go to London may think nothing of Bath. But I, who live in a small retired village in the country, can never find greater sameness in such a place as this than in my own home, for there are a variety of amusements, a variety of things to be seen and done all day long, which I can know nothing of there. You're not fond of the country? Yes, I am. I have always lived there and have always been very happy. But certainly there is much more sameness in a country life than in a Bath life. One day in the country is exactly like another. But then you spend your time so much more rationally in the country. Do I? Do you not? I do believe there's much difference. Here you're in pursuit only of amusement all day long. Well, so I am at home, only I do not find so much of it. I walk about here, and so I do there. But here I see a variety of people in every street, and there I can only go and call on Mrs. Allen. Mr. Tilney was very much amused. Only go and call on Mrs. Allen, he repeated. What a picture of intellectual poverty. However, when you sink into this abyss again, you'll have more to say. You'll be able to talk of Bath and of all that you did here. Oh, yes, I shall never be in want of something to talk again to Mrs. Allen or anybody else. I really believe I shall always be talking of Bath when I'm at home again. I do like it so very much. If I could but have Mama and Papa and the rest of 'em here, I suppose I should be too happy. James's coming, my oldest brother, is quite delightful, and especially as it turns out that the very family we are just got so intimate with are his intimate friends already. Oh, who can ever be tired of Bath? Not those who bring such fresh feelings of every sort to it as you do. But papas and mammas and brothers and intimate friends are a good deal gone by to most of the frequenters of Bath, and the honest relish of balls and plays and everyday sights is past with them. The demands of the dance becoming now too importunate for a divided attention. Soon after their reaching the bottom of the set, Catherine perceived herself to be earnestly regarded by a gentleman who stood among the onlookers. Catherine perceived herself to be earnestly regarded by a gentleman who stood among the lookers on, immediately behind her partner. He was a very handsome man, of a commanding aspect, past the bloom, but not past the vigor of life, and with his eyes still directed towards her, she saw him presently address Mr. Tilney in a familiar whisper. Confused by his notice, and blushing from the fear of its being excited by something wrong in her appearance, she turned away her head. But while she did so, the gentleman retreated, and her partner, coming nearer, said, "I see that you guess what I've just been asked. That gentleman knows your name, and you have a right to know his. It's General Tilney, my father." Catherine's answer was only, "Oh," but it was an "oh" expressing everything needful, attention to his words, and perfect reliance on their truth. With real interest and strong admiration did her eye now follow the general as he moved through the crowd, and "how handsome a family they are," was her secret remark. In chatting with Miss Tilney before the evening concluded, a new source of felicity arose to her. She had never taken a country walk since her arrival in Bath. Miss Tilney, to whom all the commonly frequented environs were familiar, spoke of them in terms which made her all eagerness to know them too, and on her openly fearing that she might not find anybody to go with her, it was proposed by the brother and sister that they should join in a walk some morning or other. "I shall like it," she cried, "beyond anything in the world, and do not let us put it off. Let us go tomorrow." This was readily agreed to, only with a proviso of Miss Tilney's that it did not rain, which Catherine was sure it would not. At 12 o'clock they were to call for her in Pulteney Street, and "remember, 12 o'clock" was her parting speech to her new friend. Of her older, her more established friend Isabella, of whose fidelity and worth she had enjoyed a fortnight's experience, she scarcely saw anything during the evening. Yet, though longing to make her acquainted with her happiness, she cheerfully submitted to the wish of Mr. Allen, which took them rather away early, and her spirits danced within her as she danced in her chair all the way home. Chapter 11. The morrow brought a very sober-looking morning, and the sun, making only a few efforts to appear, and Catherine augured from it everything most favorable to her wishes. A bright morning so early in the year, she allowed, would generally turn to rain, but a cloudy one foretold improvement as the day advanced. She applied to Mr. Allen for confirmation of her hopes, but Mr. Allen, not having his own skies and barometer about him, declined giving any absolute promise of sunshine. She applied to Mrs. Allen, and Mrs. Allen's opinion was more positive. She had no doubt in the world of its being a very fine day, if the clouds would only go off and the sun keep out. At about 11 o'clock, however, a few specks of small rain upon the windows caught Catherine's watchful eye, and said, "Oh dear, I do believe it'll be wet," broke from her in a most despondent tone. "I thought how it would be," said Mrs. Allen. "No walk for me today," sighed Catherine, "but perhaps it may come to nothing, or it may hold up before 12. "Perhaps it may, but then, my dear, it'll be so dirty." "Oh, that will not signify. I never mind dirt." "No," replied her friend very placidly, "I know you never mind dirt." After a short pause, "It comes on faster and faster," said Catherine, as she stood watching at a window. "So it does indeed. If it keeps raining, the streets will be very wet. There are 4 umbrellas up already. How I hate the sight of an umbrella. They are disagreeable things to carry. I'd much rather take a chair at any time. It was such a nice-looking morning. I felt so convinced it'd be dry. Anybody would have thought so, indeed. There will be very few people in the pump room if it rains all morning. I hope Mr. Allen will put on his greatcoat when he goes, but I dare say he'll not. and he had rather do anything in the world than walk out in a greatcoat. I wonder he should dislike it. It must be so comfortable." The rain continued, fast though not heavy. Catherine went every 5 minutes to the clock, threatening on each return that if it still kept on raining after another 5 minutes, she would give up the matter as hopeless. The clock struck 12, and still it rained. "You'll not be able to go, my dear." "I do not quite despair yet. I shall not give it up till 12:15. This is just the time of day for it to clear up, and I do think it looks a little brighter. There, it's 20 minutes after 12, and now I shall give it up entirely. Oh, that we had such weather here as they do at Udolpho, or at least in Tuscany and the south of France. The night that poor St. Aubin died, such beautiful weather." At 12:30, when Catherine's anxious attention to the weather was over, and she could no longer claim any merit from its amendment, the sky began voluntarily to clear. A gleam of sunshine took her quite by surprise. She looked round. The clouds were parting, and she instantly returned to the window to watch over and encourage the happy appearance. 10 minutes more made it certain that a bright afternoon would succeed, and justified the opinion of Mrs. Allen, who had always thought it would clear up. But whether Catherine might still expect her friends, whether there had not been too much rain for Miss Tilney to venture, must yet be a question. It was too dirty for Mrs. Allen to accompany her husband to the pump room. He accordingly set off by himself, and Catherine had barely watched him down the street when her notice was claimed by the approach of the same two open carriages containing the same three people that had surprised her so much a few mornings back. "Isabella, my brother, and Mr. Thorpe, I declare they're coming for me perhaps. But I shall not go. I cannot go, indeed, for you know Miss Tilney may still call." Mrs. Allen agreed to it. John Thorpe was soon with them, and his voice was with them yet sooner, for on the stairs he was calling out to Miss Moreland to be quick. Make haste, as he threw open the door. "Put on your hat this moment. There's no time to be lost. We're going to Bristol. How do you do, Miss Allen?" "To Bristol? Is that not a great way off? But, however, I can't go with you today because I'm engaged. I expect some friends every moment." This was, of course, vehemently talked down as no reason at all. Mrs. Allen was called on to second him, and the two others walked in to give their assistance. "My sweetest Catherine, is not this delightful? We shall have a most heavenly drive. You're to thank your brother and me for the scheme. It darted into our heads at breakfast time, I verily believe at the same instant, and we should have been off 2 hours ago if it had not been for this detestable rain. But it does not signify. The nights are moonlight, and we shall do delightfully. Oh, I'm in such ecstasies at the thought of a little country air and quiet. So much better than going to the lower rooms. We shall drive directly to Clifton and dine there, and as soon as dinner's over, it's time to go on to King Weston." "I doubt our being able to do very much," said Moreland. "You croaking fellow," cried Thorpe. "We shall be able to do 10 times more. King's Weston, and Blaise Castle too, and anything else we can hear of. But here's your sister says she'll not go." "Blaise Castle!" cried Catherine. "What is that?" "The finest place in England, worth 50 miles at any time to see." "What, is it really a castle? An old castle?" "The oldest in the kingdom." "But is it like what one reads of?" "Exactly, the very same." "But now really, are there towers and long galleries?" "By dozens." "Then I should like to see it, but I cannot go." "Not go, my beloved creature? What do you mean?" "I cannot go because," looking down as she spoke, fearful of Isabella's smile, "I expect Miss Tilney and her brother to call on me to take a country walk. They promised to come at 12, only it rained. But now, as it's so fine, I dare say they'll be here soon." "Not they, indeed," cried Thorpe, "for as we turned into Broad Street, I saw him. Does not he drive a phaeton with bright chestnuts?" "I do not know, indeed." "Yes, I know he does. I saw him. You're talking to a man you danced with last night, are you not? You're talking of the man you danced with last night, are you not?" "Yes." "Well, I saw him at that moment turn at the Lansdowne Road driving a smart-looking girl." "Did you indeed?" "Did, upon my soul. Knew him again directly, and he seemed to have got some pretty cattle, too." "It's very odd, but I suppose they thought it would be too dirty for a walk." "And well they might, for I never saw such dirt in my life. Walk! You could no more walk than you could fly. It has not been so dirty the whole winter. It's ankle deep everywhere." Isabella corroborated it. My dearest Catherine, you cannot form an idea of the dirt. Come, you must go. You cannot refuse going now. I should like to see the castle, but may we go all over it? May we go up every staircase and into every suite of rooms? Yes, yes, every hole and corner. But then, if they should only be gone for an hour till it's drier, and call by and by, make yourself easy. There's no danger of that, for I heard Tilney hallooing for a man who just passed by on horseback that they were going as far as Wick Rocks. Well, then I will. Shall I go, Mrs. Allen? Just as you please, my dear. Mrs. Allen, you must persuade her to go, was the general cry. Mrs. Allen was not inattentive to it. Well, my dear, said she, suppose you go. And in 2 minutes they were off. Catherine's feelings, as she got into the carriage, were in a very unsettled state, divided between regret for the loss of one great pleasure and the hope of soon enjoying another almost its equal in degree, however unlike in kind. She could not think the Tilneys had acted quite well by her, in so readily giving up their engagement without sending her any message of excuse. It was now but an hour later than the time fixed on for the beginning of their walk, and in spite of what she had heard of the prodigious accumulation of dirt in the course of that hour, she could not from her own observation help thinking that they might have gone with very little inconvenience. To feel herself slighted by them was very painful. On the other hand, the delight of exploring an edifice like Udolpho, as her fancy represented Blaise Castle to be, was such a counterpoise of good as might console her for almost anything. They passed briskly down Pulteney Street and through Laura Place without the exchange of many words. Thorpe talked to his horse, and she meditated by turns on broken promises and broken arches, phaetons and false hangings, Tilneys and trap doors. As they entered Argyle buildings, however, she was roused by this address from her companion. Who's that girl who looked at you so hard as she went by? Who? Where? On the right-hand pavement. She must almost be out of sight now. Catherine looked round and saw Miss Tilney leaning on her brother's arm, walking slowly down the street. She saw them both looking back at her. Stop, stop, Mr. Thorpe, she impatiently cried. It's Miss Tilney. It is indeed. How could you tell me they were gone? Stop, stop. I'll get out this moment and go to them. But to what purpose did she speak? Thorpe only lashed his horse into a brisker trot. The Tilneys, who had soon ceased to look after her, were in a moment out of sight round the corner of Laura Place, and in another moment she was herself whisked into the market-place. Still, however, enduring the length of another street, she entreated him to stop. Pray stop, Mr. Thorpe. I cannot go on. I will not go on. I must go back to Miss Tilney. But Mr. Thorpe only laughed, smacked his whip, encouraged his horse, made odd noises, and drove on. And Catherine, angry and vexed as she was, having no power of getting away, was obliged to give up the point and submit. Her reproaches, however, were not spared. How could you deceive me so, Mr. Thorpe? How could you say that you saw him driving up the Lansdowne Road? I would not have had it happen so for the world. They must think it so strange, so rude of me to go by him, too, without saying a word. You don't know how vexed I am. I shall have no pleasure at Clifton, nor anything else. I'd rather 10,000 times rather get out now and walk back to him. How could you say you saw him driving out in a phaeton? Thorpe defended himself very stoutly, declared he had never seen two men such alike in his life, so much alike in his life, and would hardly give up the point of its having been Tilney himself. Their drive, even when this subject was over, was not likely to be very agreeable. Catherine's complaisance was no longer what it had been in their former airing. She listened reluctantly, and her replies were short. Blaise Castle remained her only comfort. Towards that, she still looked at intervals with pleasure, though rather to be disappointed of the promised walk, and especially rather than to be thought ill of by the Tilneys, she would willingly have given up all the happiness which its walls could supply. The happiness of a progress through a long suite of lofty rooms, exhibiting the remains of magnificent furniture, though now for many years deserted, the happiness of being stopped in their way along narrow winding vaults by a low grated door, or even of having their lamp, their only lamp, extinguished by a sudden gust of wind, and being left in total darkness. In the meanwhile, they proceeded on their journey without any mischance, and were within view of the town of Kinsham when a halloo from Moreland, who was behind them, made his friend pull up to know what was the matter. The others then came close enough for conversation, and Moreland said, "We better go back, Thorpe. It's too late to go on today. Your sister thinks so as well as I. We've been exactly an hour coming from Pulteney Street, very little more than 7 miles, and I suppose we got at least 8 more to go. It'll never do. We set out a great deal too late. We had much better put it off till another day and turn around." "It's all one to me," replied Thorpe rather angrily, and instantly turning his horse, they were on their way back to Bath. "If your brother had not got such a beast to drive," said he soon afterwards, "we might have done it very well. My horse would have trotted to Clifton within the hour if left to himself, and I've almost broke my arm with pulling him into that cursed broken-winded Jade's pace. Moreland's a fool for not keeping a horse and gig of his own." "No, he's not," said Catherine warmly, "for I'm sure he could not afford it." "And why can he not afford it?" "Because he has not money enough." "And whose fault is that?" "Nobody's that I know of." Thorpe then said something in the loud, incoherent way to which he often had recourse, about what a thing it was to be miserly, and that if people who rolled in money could not afford things, he did not know who could, which Catherine did not even endeavor to understand. Disappointed of what was to have been the consolation for her first disappointment, she was less and less disposed either to be disagreeable herself or to find her companions so, and they returned to Pulteney Street without her speaking 20 words. As she entered the house, the footman told her that a gentleman and lady had catted and inquired for her a few minutes after her setting off. When he told them she had gone out with Mr. Thorpe, the lady had asked whether any message had been left for her, and on his saying no, had felt for a card, but said she had none about her, and went away. Pondering over these heart-rending tidings, Catherine walked slowly upstairs. At the head of them she was met by Mr. Allen, who, on hearing the reason of their speedy return, said, "I'm glad your brother had so much sense. I'm glad y'all come back. It was a strange, wild scheme." They all spent the evening together at Thorpe's. Catherine was disturbed and out of spirits, but Isabella seemed to find a pool of commerce in the fate of which she shared by private partnership with Moreland, a very good equivalent for the quiet and country air of an inn at Clifton. Her satisfaction, too, in not being at the lower rooms was spoken more than once. "How I pity the poor creatures that are going there! How glad I am not amongst them! I wonder whether it'll be a full ball or not. They have not begun dancing yet. I would not be there for all the world. It's so delightful to have an evening now and then to oneself. I dare say it'll not be a very good ball. I know the Mitchells will not be there. I'm sure I pity everybody, that is. But I dare say, Mr. Moreland, you long to be at it, do not you? I'm sure you do. Well, pray you don't let anybody here be a restraint on you. I dare say we could do very well without you, but you men think yourselves such consequence." Catherine could almost have accused Isabella of being wanting in tenderness towards herself and her sorrows, so very little did they appear to dwell on her mind, and so very inadequate was the comfort she offered. "Do not be dull, my dearest creature," she whispered. "You'll quite break my heart. It was amazingly shocking, to be sure, but the Tilneys were entirely to blame. Why were they not more punctual? It was dirty indeed, but what did that signify? I'm sure John and I should not have minded. I never mind going through anything where a friend's concerned. That's my disposition, and John's just the same. He has amazing strong feelings. Good heavens, what a delightful hand you've got. Kings, I vow. I never was so happy in my life. I would 50 times rather you should have 'em than myself." And now I may dismiss my heroine to the sleepless couch, which is the true heroine's portion, to a pillow strewed with thorns and wet with tears. And lucky may she think herself if she get another good night's rest in the course of the next 3 months.